This is The Bottom Line with Boney MUA.
Hello there, and a very warm welcome to the program The Bottom Line with me, Boney MUA. The African continent is today undergoing a series of mutations in the political, economic, and social environment. While some countries are sticking with their colonial approach, that is, doing business with their former colonial masters, some are seeking for new routes with emerging countries like China, Brazil, Turkey, and India. But what is the legislation underlying these mutations? On set today, we have Chief Barrister AGHA Albert NGWANA, an international lawyer and businessman. Barrister, you are welcome to the program The Bottom Line with me.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to be here.
Your CV is, to say the least, very impressive. You are a member of the American Bar Association, and more importantly, you are a traditional ruler, because you have the title of chief. And which community are you a traditional ruler?
Well, actually, I'm a titled. My chieftaincy comes from my father. I inherited it from my father, but I'm from the Beba village in Mentru.
You are also the chief executive officer of Aftel Cameroon Limited, a company working closely with Obasanjo Holdings, aiming to establish large-scale agriculture and industrial projects in Cameroon. Tell us more about this holding.
Well, look, Aftel Cameroon Limited is a subsidiary of Aftel LLC in the United States. It stands for Assisting Facilitating Trade, Entrepreneurship, and Life. We decided to do business in Africa because we found out that Africa's problems are our opportunity, and it's our business, really. So that's when we started doing business in 2001 in the continent. President Obasanjo happened to be doing business with us because we found in him a champion of African cross-border African trade, you know, as advocated or promoted by the African Continental Free Trade Association. He's a #1 farmer in Africa, and we thought that you cannot be a promoter of cross-border trade in Africa, being our neighbor, and not be present in Cameroon.
And when you're talking of, he is a farmer, large-scale farmer. He's also created so many billionaires in Nigeria. When he was president of that huge country, people like Dangote and the rest were created by Obasanjo. Yeah. This is something that can be emulated by other presidents.
Obasanjo is a visionary. President Obasanjo has always been a visionary. He's one who made migrating from Nigeria not the most attractive. When he came up with his reforms in Nigeria experienced a negative migration. There's people from the diaspora and everywhere else.
They were coming back now.
Coming back, and the others were deciding to stay in Nigeria. Nigeria was valorized, whereby all these big movements, where the movie, the music, the business moves that Nigeria made, Nigeria became the #1 economy in Africa with all these promotions that he did.
Yeah, the president of the African Development Bank, Nigerian-born Akinwumi Adesina, is famously remembered for saying that the best thing that has happened to the continent is the creation of the African Free Trade Zone Agreement. Is that correct by your understanding?
By far so. I believe that a continental free trade area is going to boost the economy of every single African country and make every African much richer than we are right now.
On paper, it looks so good, you understand? It looks so good and very impressive, but it is almost a fiasco in practice. Most African countries continue to do business with their former colonial powers. What legal framework can be used to give a new impetus to this free trade agreement that we're talking about?
For one thing, I'll tell you there's a new world order with these political appointments in the US and everywhere else. Another thing I'll tell you is that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is a movement that is going to go on until 2065. You know, they started little by little. Countries have already aligned, signed up to it. Nigeria being the biggest, is one of the biggest signings. I believe that when you remove all those barriers to trade and you see the synergies and the economies of scales between the countries and trade flowing with, between one country and the other, it is going to give every African country a 1.5 billion people market. That is huge, and that will take us to a different level. So I believe that the movement, although it might seem disorderly, if you want to put it that way, it's a movement that is going to happen. It's the creation of that enabling environment. That whole treaty is the creation of an enabling environment, be it legal or any other thing, to remove these boundaries and to promote that common area of trade, which is the best thing. The Europeans have had theirs, and they're doing very well with the European Union. I believe that the Americans with NAFTA, it is going to be fantastic for Africa to have that one big common area where they can use their synergies, their differences, and promote, so that now they can face the world as a global force.
Yes, this Nigerian-born president of the African Development Bank, Adesina, has been speaking glowingly about the African Free Trade Zone. Very soon he's going to quit office. Do you have any preference for the person who's going to take over? Is the person from SADC? Is the Senegalese? Who do you think would continue with this momentum that was started by this Nigerian-born president?
I think that it's a momentum that will continue no matter who is president, because it has already taken flesh. When you have the most populous country in Africa adhering to it, there's a no going back attitude. Africans are quickly learning that our independence, our industrialization is very important, and that Africa is where everything is for the future. So the need for us to come together, to have a common trade area, to take advantage of our synergies, the economies of scale, is very important for the survival of our continent.
Yeah, you just came back from Nigeria a few days back. Were you there on a business trip to see your partners, Obasanjo and the rest? Can we have a clue of your visit to Nigeria?
The visit to Nigeria was in continuation and to finalize the protocols for President Obasanjo's visit to Cameroon. President Obasanjo is going to come to Cameroon, as he's already promised and stated to the government. Where I wanted to make sure that we have his itinerary and his schedule in line with his trip. But more importantly, before going on that trip, Nigeria just signed that big treaty with the African Continental Trade. We're going there also to get partners. We believe that Nigeria is a plug and play kind of situation. We can have a plug and play thing with Cameroon, whereby we get serious partners who can do things. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to complement what we have with what they have and develop these countries and move forward, so that we don't waste the time we've been losing 50 years on trying to do things through colonial powers that don't have our interests at heart.
Yes, let's talk a bit about the holdings, the Obasanjo holdings that is planning to invest in the Kribi deep sea port. It's a huge project. Can you give us a clue of what these projects are all about?
I won't even go that way. I'll tell you what is a think tank from China told me. They called me after seeing one of my interviews.
Yes.
And they told me very carefully. They said, Africa, and they said China, 1.4 billion people. Africa, 1.5 billion people. Asia, 5 billion people. China's market, 6.5. That tells me a lot. Understand that? That brings a lot. Kribi is seen as a strategic outlet for the Chinese. They build a port. They want to make Kribi a strategic outlet for East and West Africa. And if we play our cards right and we have the vision, Kribi is going to be the most important port in the whole of Africa.
Yeah, from the way you talk, it's like the Chinese, they love Cameroon even more than the Cameroonians, because if you see the investments that they have put in around, whether it's in Kribi, whether it's in Douala, Yaoundé, everywhere, it's huge.
China is about Chinese interest, first of all. You know, once we start thinking about Africa as being our interest and then a place where business can thrive, then we are going to have a continent that is going to be so growing. I believe that business is a question of margin. You go and do business where you have the best margins. And China has seen Africa as the best margin in the world for it to have. So Africa is the growing part of the world for the Chinese, and they will keep investing. The Chinese just opened a bank in Congo, the World United Bank, which is 100% owned by China, to finance African businesses by this Chinese bank, which means that, you know, they understand what business is, promoting infrastructure, goods and services move, advantage of business people, advantage of Africa maybe. But, you know, the first thing that we have to be thinking is that economics is not humanitarian, it is a war. You know, economic survival is a continuous war. The US, China, and everybody else are exhibiting it. Africans should wake up, prepare themselves for this war the best way they can. And the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is one of those arms that they should use.
Yes, when we look at the different trade zones in Africa, there is SADC, there is ECOWAS, CEMAC, and the rest. Which one will you rank first to be an example to emulate?
Well, look, you see, SADC is very impressive. ECOWAS has been working for good years. CEMAC, well, the area that the common area, the common market that has the easiest free flow of goods and services and humans from one place to the other is always the better one, because then you can take advantage of your economies of scale, and you can take advantage of the synergies you have to be a stronger bloc and help everybody move forward. So I look at it from that perspective, you know, and time will tell. You know, CEMAC is a very good idea, but they have to really implement this free trade of goods.
Yes, some economic pundits have been quick to point out CEMAC, that is the Central African Monetary and Economic Union, as the last in the class. I mean, it is difficult for people and goods to move from one point to the other. You have the recent expulsion of Cameroonians from Equatorial Guinea. So what can be done? What cohesive measures can be taken for member states to comply to this African trade agreement that we're talking about?
To tell you the truth, I think it's a question of economics. Anybody who's doing that is causing itself harm in the long run. These agreements create the enabling environment for better common market areas. And I believe that you know, the laws in place in the CEMAC will foster this. Okay, it's a question of time. Whoever had done that, he has done himself big harm. And the way you move forward is by continuing to implement these laws. You have to have uniformity of laws, granted.
But some cohesive measures must be taken if you don't comply with these laws, because there are some countries who decide not to comply.
Yeah, I mean, the only cohesive measure you can take is by sanction, you know, if they don't comply. But me, I believe truly that, you know, these are self-correcting measures that will happen. If you deny a country from your business, you're excluding yourself from a common market area, and in the long run, you'll be the one harmed. You cannot, as a single bloc, do this battle against the monster of world trade.
Yeah, so how can African governments make their legal systems more friendly, attractive to investors without compromising local interests? What can be done?
Well, the first thing is enforcement. Enforcement of laws.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody violates the laws, there should be able to be some kind of enforcement that makes it possible for the other side to have justice. You know, and that is all about keeping away all the killing, bribery, reforming the legal rules, the laws of countries, so that we can have laws that are properly enforced. That justice is reflected for these people when they come. They are wronged, they can be corrected.
Yes, when you talk of bribery and corruption, I think in some countries it is endemic and systemic. I will take the case of Nigerian business magnate Aliko Dangote. When he came to invest in the cement factory in Cameroon, cement sector in Cameroon, the traditional rulers of the littoral, they stood up They did not want him. They were talking of encroaching on their ancestral land and that their traditional dance, the Ngodo, was not going to take place. But Aliko Dangote said he is an African and he knows how to do business in Africa. Is that not bribery in essence?
You have to look at things very factually. Culture has a value. The preservation of culture has a value. You understand? Nobody should be coming and destroying the culture of another person without having to pay. Once we give proper value to our culture, to the preservation of our culture, I think that we will see that what Aliko Dangote experienced and did was not bribery per se. Okay, it was a question of preservation of the culture. How much do I have to pay to make sure that this, or what do I have to do to correct this situation? Those are things that we have to take care of. We cannot eliminate culture, we cannot destroy culture in the name of business. We have to enhance it. We have to create an environment where both can thrive. Culture is the wealth of a nation.
Yeah, but most guardians of our culture, they use it to make money for themselves. Because when you talk, you give money. I mean, do you see any replicate of what they are doing, or they just take the money and say, oh, we took money for this purpose and we don't see anything in return?
Well, in the Gudwara case, finally they got some buildings and different things for reparation. As you know, my family is also from the Bell Kingdom, from the Bell family, directly from Bell, and also from the West region. So, as a Cameroonian,
yes,
Anglophone, Francophone, and all the métissage, I'll tell you that, look, it's a kind of enabling environment, legal environment that you put in place that saves all this. There has to be a way to enforce laws so that whoever is wronged gets justice.
Yes, so how can investors, whether Africans or foreigners, navigate corruption when doing business in high-risk African jurisdictions? Let's say Cameroon, how can they thrive?
For one, if I'm to invest in Cameroon as a foreign investor, the first thing I do is I mitigate my risk. I have to have all the insurances in place.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, you have to get a good law firm to represent your interests, get a good accounting firm, basic things like you do in the US. All right, but you have to be compliant so that at the end you can get proper justice mitigation in any kind of sense. So my advice to investors coming in here is that they have to have a certain level of preparedness and they have to use the local expertise to protect their interests. It's very important. You know, you cannot come from outside and expect to be the expert of the inside. You have to find the expert of the inside so that it makes you navigate the waters properly. You understand? But no matter what we say, there has to be proper law reforms to make all of this fluent also.
And let's have a commercial break and we'll continue with the next segment of our program.
Goshen Land City, a cozy way of living at home away from home. A majestic twin tower situated at Limbola, opposite the entrance to Mile 6 Beach Limbe. Beautifully couched between Mount Cameroon and the Atlantic Ocean. We offer various packages: business class lodges with 2 bedrooms, executive apartments with 3 bedrooms, royal attic suites with 2 bedrooms. All provided with luxurious sitting rooms, Porsche bedrooms, well-equipped functional kitchens, exquisite toilets, and sea view verandas, giving you an idea of Equatorial Guinea by night. A standby generator ensuring constant electricity supply, full autonomy and clean running water, Wi-Fi, TV packages, secure parkings, plus laundry, shuttle, and car rental services available. We are ideally suited for couple, family, or group stays. Whether visiting or holidaying in the tourist city of Limbe, Goshen Land City is your best bet. Discover Goshen Land City for its exquisite beauty, and you'll come back for its impeccable services. Contact us at 675-113-244 or 688-358-436.
And this is a follow-up just to the question that ended our commercial break. What legal protections do foreign investors typically lack in African markets, and how can this be strengthened?
Well, as I said, the problem in Cameroon, for example, is that you can be wronged and not get proper justice. So, you know, that's the loophole. You understand?
Yes.
Number one, you have to have a lawyer, a competent lawyer, Cameroonian, who can represent your interests. okay, because they will know the proper ways of doing it. But number two, there has to be, from my perspective, you know, and I see it going on now, the new young barristers are taking professional ethics courses, which are very good, right? But there has to be a reform of the law that reflects that if you know, somebody who comes to acquire rights in Cameroon can be protected. That is what consumer has to be protected, because that helps, that encourages foreign investment. It cannot be that somebody who's wrong is justified without the law. So proper enforcement, there has to be that proper reform of laws. What I advise everybody who comes here is that, one, get a serious law firm who understands international law. Number two, get yourself a good accountant for taxes and different things.
Good, exactly. When you talk about getting a law firm, an accountant, because the common practice before was like, the owner of the company is the manager, is the tax accountant, he is the lawyer, he is everything, which is not possible. We have division of labor in some of these businesses. And this is what that, especially small entrepreneurs should learn, that there is division of labor in what we are doing.
Of course. And that also creates an enabling environment for everybody. Because the biggest problem in the African economic sector is that we do not recognize the value of services. Whether it's legal services, whether it's accounting services, marketing services, we have to take, for example, the U.S. economy is 60% service industry based. So
it means the service sector, the service industry is not well developed
it's not a question of well developed. It's not well remunerated. And people don't appreciate it, the value of it. If you want to have something good, use an expert. If you don't have the expertise, and pay the experts what they deserve. That also helps the whole economy work better. You understand? Mm-hmm. And that helps other people, that creation of jobs and all those kinds of things.
Yes, you see, even small businesses, they suffer from the lack of legal frameworks. What is the legal framework, or how are the existing ones be adapted to support startups and small businesses?
Well, look, listen, from my own perspective, I believe that, you know, the country has the laws in place, right? It's a question of adapting and knowing how to take advantages of those laws. Sometimes it's an educational kind of thing. Sometimes it's just that it is more than the person who's trying to do it. So they need those services from that service sector I'm talking about. You understand? And that will help everybody. It creates the enabling environment for proper business growth and for business to flow very well with other countries and within Cameroon.
Yes, as a business lawyer, what role should legal professionals play in bridging the gap between business opportunities and regulations in Africa?
Well, look, listen, first of all, the first thing they have to do is educate themselves properly in those areas. You understand? Yeah. Once they are properly educated in those areas, then they can properly advise their clients and all that kind of stuff, and also advise their countries. Okay, in terms of the treaties, how to implement these laws, you know, in the country, and how to acquire rights if they are violated and all that stuff. So it's a question of education, I believe. Okay, they have to have that kind of education that will enable this, the growth of the African international business and the practice itself. Yeah,
but most people complain, well, most of the time people complain about the exorbitant fees that you lawyers charge. So much that if I want to start a business, I start looking, oh, how much am I going to pay? Maybe I can do it myself. I mean, is there no regulation for the fees paid by lawyers so that we know exactly how much we are paying?
Well, look, listen, there are lawyers for everybody. If you go and take a lawyer that is charging 1 million when your total income is 100,000, it's a problem. I believe that a lawyer goes to, you know, takes the fees that are offered to him sometimes, all right? Mm-hmm. They're exorbitant because they're fees that the regular businessman doesn't see as a necessity until there's trouble. You understand? Mm-hmm. That's why I say generally, like accountants that you must have, like tax advisors that you must have a lawyer that you can call on at any time to advise you prior to being in trouble. And that's how these things go. And take a lawyer you can afford. If you can afford 25,000, don't go and pay 100,000. You understand? And that's how we move. And that's everybody will marry themselves up properly like that. I think the market commands the fees.
Yes, Barrister NGWANA, we cannot talk about doing business in Africa without talking about the diaspora. You are also part of the diaspora. So what can be done to encourage diaspora to invest back home?
For me, Africa is where everything is. That's one. Number two, the diaspora has to realize and count amongst themselves. How many of them are millionaires in those countries they are? How many of them have disposable income? Well, how many of them have good savings?
Yeah.
Okay, and take those ratios and compare them to Africans in Africa. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And then look at the opportunities that they can have direct there themselves. When they do all those things, then they have to prepare themselves for investment. Not come and invest recklessly. Reckless investment is that you are not prepared. Protect, have the proper protections, get the proper legal background, legal framework, get the accountants, prepare your package. Do like if you are doing a business in the US. And come back here and make your investments very wisely. We are now in the digital age. They can do most of their things virtually and still get the benefit.
Yeah, Barrister, we cannot talk about, we cannot end this conversation without asking you about you as an influential member of the diaspora. When you see the Cameroonian diaspora in the US, the UK, Germany, and elsewhere, what do you tell them? Because it's like, instead of investing back home, they are fanning the flames of violence, because the situation in which we find ourselves today is part of the diaspora.
Well, listen, I have to, my words of advice and caution is that there's nowhere in the world that there's no problem. That's number one. But dialogue is very important, one. Number two, we have to look at the character of our country. Our country has a character. We're different people, we're tribal people. We have to be able to live as one, okay? And living as one, we can also develop as one. They have to love their countries beyond their personal objectives. You understand my point? In the sense that Cameroon is a big country with different people, different colors around it. You love Cameroon, you're coming to Cameroon to develop. And the amount of gratification you get is beyond anything you can get anywhere else. So when they look at all those things and ask themselves the questions, where do I want to retire? And how well do I want that place I'm retiring to be? You know? Then they start thinking about how to reintegrate the society, how to invest, and how to prepare for that retirement, better forms. I think that if you want to be a politician, go to the country and do political things, like every politician. I don't see where in the world you can be a politician outside the country. You can be a revolutionary.
So what you say is that your home is your home. You cannot run away from your home, just like leaving your shadow, or you cannot leave your shadow.
You cannot leave your shadow. I believe that Africans leave perfection to go and suffer. You know, you leave the country that the continent that everybody wants to be in, to run and go and serve another country that they don't want you.
Yeah, but Barrister, I would like you to give some examples of where the diaspora have invested in Africa and they are making it big time, so that it should actually lure some of this diaspora to come back home and then do same.
Let me just give you a simple example. During the Obasanjo Atiku regime, they made reforms, banking reforms, legal reforms, and different reforms that made Nigeria a negative migration country. It means that Nigeria started experiencing reverse migration. You know, when you do that, that means that what they saw in their own country, because of those reforms, made it more attractive for them to go there. You know, I have friends who were in Wall Street, who went back and became bankers and are multi-millionaires today. You understand? They're doing advisory services. They're making a lot of money because of the reverse migration, because of the policies. So I believe that they should contribute in advising their governments, okay, with the knowledge they have acquired, okay, to do reforms that are attractive for the population, okay, because Africa is the wealthiest continent in the world. We cannot run away from that wealth.
When you say, I mean, it looks so sweet and so good. I mean, but Barrister, you know that fine. This one, I know you are not a politician, but you in Cameroon, we're having upcoming elections. I mean, what would you want to see for what that's going to happen in Cameroon in the next years?
Okay, well, you know, Cameroon, as I said, Cameroon is a country where if you want proper reform, okay, you have to be involved in the political agenda. We have a country, basically we have a one-party system.
Good.
And let us acknowledge that we have a one-party system, you know. And if we're going to do a reform, we're going to have to do a reform that acknowledges that one-party system until we have a fair electoral kind of thing. And when I say
even
fair,
in the one-party system, we can still do fair elections.
What I say fair, you know, I'm not trying to be whatsoever. If you recognize that the veins of your body make your blood flow, yeah? What happens is that now if you want to change the whole system, okay, you have to find a better way to make your blood flow. Do you understand me? I believe that saying that all those things we are saying about politics and all that kind of stuff, but we realize that until we do our proper internal reforms, okay, we're not going to go further with what we have. Especially
to adapt with the modern context in which we find ourselves, the digital context in which we find ourselves.
We are in an artificial intelligence world right now.
Yeah.
I believe that, you know, economic change, development, human rights that is proposed by people. The people, whether we like it or not, are the governing body of this country, or of any country. We should come and implement. You understand? If they cut our throats for trying to develop our own country, then you know what the consequences. But I think that I really do believe that I'm here, okay? And I go everywhere in Africa. And I've experienced all kinds of different things in Africa whatsoever. I never ran away from Cameroon because Cameroon has an Ambazonia situation or a Boko Haram situation. Never ran away from Nigeria because Nigeria has a Niger Delta situation. Never ran away from any problem areas. I told you when I started these conversations, the problems of Africa are my business because we want the betterment of Africa and solutions for Africa.
And in any problem, there are advantages that can be reaped from that problem.
Of course, but to better Africa. That's why cross-border trade will solve a lot of our problem. Think about one common area, one common problem. Do you understand? There are many advantages that are benefiting us with a common area. Because now it's not one man fighting this, it become a union wanting this to survive and survive beautifully. You understand?
Barrister, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.